a church's governing document. What in the world does that mean? Well, you know, it's basically your constitution and bylaws, by whatever designation or appellation you give it. So let's talk about that for a minute. What are they? And let me define from the Model Nonprofit Corporation Act, 3rd edition, 2008, which is this kind of a uniform nonprofit corporation statute that many states have adopted as their own with minor changes. But so this is a very authoritative legal resource. Here's how they define bylaws. Quote, the code or codes of rules adopted for the regulation and governance of the internal affairs of the nonprofit corporation, regardless of the name or names used to refer to those rules. I think that's a great definition. The key is the rules adopted for the regulation and governance of the internal affairs of the nonprofit corporation. Now, we're going to be talking about later this morning, this afternoon, later in this presentation, what about the policies? And there's a difference between policies and bylaws. Policies are not rules for the regulation and governance of the internal affairs of the corporation, as we will see. So now a very common question is, do we need a constitution and bylaws? And the answer is no. Look at the United States Constitution. We don't have the United States bylaws. The modern trend is to have one document. The only reason for having two documents, in my opinion, is you want to make one more authoritative than the other. So, for example, it's common for churches to have a constitution that requires a 2/3 vote for amendments and an advance notice before, so you can't just bring it up on the floor of a business meeting. Whereas the bylaws take a simple majority vote, a lower number, and can be amended on the floor of a business meeting. So they're easier to craft. So churches sometimes will put their doctrinal statement, issues of the acquisition or sale of property, things like that in the Constitution, and then have everything else in the bylaws. And that's okay. But if you have two documents, what so often happens is they become at variance because you amend one and you forget to amend the other. I've seen it happen over and over again. So just remember, but the point is, well, we want to have certain articles in our bylaws have a more difficult percentage vote required for amendment. And that's okay. In the amendment paragraph of your bylaws, which is usually the final paragraph, you can say Articles 3, 7, and 9 require a 2/3 vote, all others of simple majority. Something that can be addressed in the articles on the issue before us here for amendments. Now, let me make a few other comments here. Rules of priority. Which of these documents has the greatest priority of your governing documents? Well, traditionally, and today, to this day, the charter is your most authoritative legal document. It doesn't say anything. It gives you a name, your period of duration, your location. It doesn't have any detail. So it's rare that applies. But I would say this about charters that's very important. You need to look at your corporate charter, which is the document by which you were incorporated under state nonprofit corporation law. Look at that document and look at the duration. How long was your corporation organized for? My own church was for 50 years. And this is like in the 1960s or 1920s. And that 50-year came and went and nobody knew it. And so some of you are not incorporated, but you think you are. Go to your Secretary of State website for your state and look up corporations, name search, find your church, and see what your state thinks you are. Are you incorporated? Are you expired? Very important to know, as we'll see. Frequently omitted items. Man, there's so many things we could talk about here. What is your parliamentary authority? What about annual audits, indemnification of officers? What is your fiscal year? taking action of the board by written consent, which Robert's rules allows and state nonprofit corporation law allows. You can take action without a meeting as a board by having unanimous written consent if it's recognized in your bylaws. Very helpful. My church has used that many times. Let's see here. So those are some of the issues that.
Rich, what do you?
Yes,
what do you say? I know we get the question quite a bit from church leaders regarding statements of faith, kind of doctrinal positions. You know, is there a time and a place for those to be incorporated into things like Constitution and bylaws? Can you just kind of touch briefly on that? I know you've answered that question before, and I think there's there's certain arguments that need to be sort of understood as far as that's concerned.
I don't think they belong in the bylaws. They're extraneous to bylaws. They're independent of bylaws. Bylaws, again, are the code of rules adopted for the regulation and governance of the internal affairs of the nonprofit corporation. That has nothing to do with the policy. Policies for such things as marriage, same-sex marriage, what is your church's view on that? Employment issues, bans, screening of workers, internal controls of your finances. I mean, these are things that you don't want to clutter up your body. They have nothing to do with the internal governance of the church, but there's nothing wrong with putting them in a policy manual. And that's where I think they belong, unless they're doctrinal issues, which would be part of your doctrinal statement to the extent you have the authority to do that if you're not associated with a denomination that would supersede that authority.
That makes sense. That's helpful. It shows the hierarchy that you've talked about as far as Constitution, bylaws, and then policies and where those would fit in. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel below. Make sure to hit the notifications button so you'll be notified every time a new video is released. Also, be sure to visit churchlawandtax.com for the latest church-specific coverage.